You see, most people live under the illusion that life is something they must conquer, that they must struggle against the currents of uncertainties, striving endlessly to control outcomes, manipulate circumstances, and force their desires into reality. But what if you stopped? What if, instead of bracing yourself against the chaos, you leaned into the rhythm of the universe with a quiet, unwavering trust that everything, yes, everything, always works out for you? A curious thing, this idea, to act as if the game is rigged in your favor. Not arrogantly, not with entitlement, but with the serenity of someone who knows that they are part of something far more intelligent than their own plans. Imagine moving through your days with the unshakable belief that life is not a series of random misfortunes or haphazard victories, but a perfectly orchestrated dance, in which every misstep, every delay, every so-called failure is simply a clever turn in the choreography, not an error, but an invitation to see things differently. The problem is, we have become so accustomed to fear and resistance that we treat uncertainty like a threat rather than an adventure. We armor ourselves with worry, expecting disappointment just to shield ourselves from the sting of it. We say things like, "I'm just being realistic," when in fact we are only being afraid. But consider the weight that falls away when you choose instead to live as if you are deeply loved by existence itself, that no matter what occurs, the unfolding of your life is always leading you somewhere meaningful, even when the map makes no sense. To act as if everything works out for you is not to deny the storms. It is to carry an inner sun that refuses to be dimmed by them. It is to walk through uncertainty with grace, not because you know the outcome, but because you trust the process. You begin to meet setbacks with curiosity, not panic. You see endings not as failures, but as gentle nudges toward better beginnings. You smile not because life is perfect, but because you are no longer enslaved by the illusion that it needs to be. And once you begin to live this way, truly live this way, the world begins to mirror it back to you. Circumstances soften, opportunities reveal themselves, people show up when you need them, often without explanation. Coincidences begin to form a pattern, not because some external force is suddenly favoring you, but because you finally attuned yourself to the natural flow of things. You've stopped clutching at control, and in doing so, you've allowed the deeper intelligence of life to breathe through you. This is not about pretending to be happy when you're not. It's not about faking positivity or suppressing pain. It's about cultivating a radical kind of faith, not in a distant deity, but in the sacredness of your own experience. The kind of faith that whispers, "I don't know how, I don't know when, but I know that this too is working for me." The kind of faith that turns every detour into a discovery, every heartbreak into a holy invitation, every delay into divine timing. There is a peculiar magic in surrender. Not the surrender of defeat, but the surrender of resistance. When you stop insisting that life obey your expectations, you begin to notice that it has been working in your favor all along, only in ways you never thought to imagine. You see, the universe doesn't speak in straight lines. It speaks in spirals, in paradoxes, in synchronicities. And it only begins to make sense when you stop demanding sense from it. So try, just for a moment, to carry yourself as if you are safe, as if every closed door has a reason, as if every painful moment is a seed, as if every unanswered prayer is a redirection towards something more aligned. Begin to walk not in fear of what might go wrong, but in quiet excitement for how it might all come together in ways you couldn't plan if you tried. And watch, slowly but certainly, how life begins to rise up to meet that expectation. Let go of control. Trust the flow of life. It sounds simple, almost poetic, but the reality of it, the lived truth, is one of the most difficult things for the human mind to accept. We are taught from a young age that if we don't grip tightly, plan meticulously, and worry constantly, then everything will fall apart. We believe, deep down, that our effort alone is what keeps the world from crumbling around us, and so we live clenched, bodies tense, minds buzzing, hearts restless, always anticipating the next catastrophe, always preparing for some future we cannot see. But have you ever stopped and asked, who told you that life needs to be controlled? Who convinced you that without your anxiety, your constant micromanagement of every possibility, things would go wrong? You see, there's a deep illusion embedded in our way of thinking that we are separate from life and that life is something that must be tamed or directed. This is where all the fear begins. Because the moment you see yourself as an outsider, you believe you must manipulate what's outside to feel safe inside. But the truth is, you are not separate from life. You are life. You are the same intelligence that grows trees without instruction, beats your heart without your permission, and brings waves to shore without needing a manual. And yet, despite this profound connection to something far beyond your conscious comprehension, you still worry that if you let go, everything will collapse. But perhaps it is only when you let go that things can begin to rise. To trust the flow of life is not to become passive. It is to become deeply aligned. It is not the same as giving up. It is the act of stepping back into harmony with what is already unfolding. Life is movement. It is always in motion, always changing, always unfolding. And when you try to stop that movement, when you try to hold things still or force them in a particular direction, you create tension. You create friction between your expectations and reality. That friction is what we often call suffering. Think about the river. It doesn't ask where it is going. It doesn't try to skip the rocks or avoid the bends. It flows, because that is its nature. And the beauty of the river is not found in its straightness, but in its curves. Likewise, your life is not meant to be a rigid line from point A to point B. It is meant to meander, to surprise you, to take you through forests you didn't plan for and valleys you never dreamed of. But if you're too busy trying to paddle upstream, you'll miss the magic of where the current is trying to take you. There's a kind of grace that arrives when you finally say, I don't need to control this anymore. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped clinging. You allowed life to breathe again. You allowed yourself to breathe again. You might wonder, what if letting go means I lose something important? But I would ask you, how many things have you lost by holding on too tightly? How many moments have passed you by because you were too busy trying to control the next one? The irony is that in our obsession with controlling life, we often miss living it. We become so attached to outcomes that we forget the present is already sacred. We wait for the perfect alignment, the perfect condition, before we allow ourselves to relax. But life never promised perfection. It only promised presence. And presence is all you ever needed. Letting go is not something you do once. It's a practice. A moment-by-moment remembrance that you are not here to control the tide, only to surf it. And some days the waves will be high. Other days the water will be still. But your peace doesn't have to depend on the conditions. Your peace can come from knowing that you are never truly off course. Even the detours, even the delays, are part of the dance. You may not always understand them in the moment, but life has a way of revealing its wisdom in hindsight. Often, it's the things we fought hardest against that ended up saving us.
I believe that if we are honest with ourselves,
Ladies and gentlemen, there's something tragically beautiful about realizing that someone simply doesn't care. It's not a mistake. It's not miscommunication. It's not because they're busy, confused, or complicated. It's because they don't care. And the moment you accept that truth, without making excuses, without bargaining, without trying to change them, you take your power back. You see, the greatest suffering doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being attached to those who are emotionally absent, trying to ignite a flame in hearts that have gone cold. This speech will challenge your emotional reflexes. It will show you how to let go, not out of anger, but out of awareness. Because once you stop wasting yourself on people who don't care, your life changes. Stay with me till the end. Because what you learn here won't just help you walk away. It will teach you how to never return. Your energy is your currency. Spend it wisely. We often think of energy in terms of productivity, as something to be measured, controlled, and maximized for results. But energy is much deeper than that. It is the essence of your attention, your presence, your spirit. Every time you speak to someone, care for someone, invest emotion in someone, you are spending your energy, not metaphorically, but quite literally. And just like money, energy flows toward what you value. But unlike money, it never comes back in the same form once it's given. It changes you. The tragedy is most people are not conscious of how they spend their energy. They give it away to those who don't appreciate it, to those who take it for granted, to those who don't even notice it. They waste it on arguments that go nowhere, relationships that lead to emptiness, and people who are emotionally bankrupt. It's like pouring water into a cracked glass. It leaks, and you wonder why you're always thirsty for peace. Energy has value. It is sacred. And when you begin to understand that your energy is your life, you will stop distributing it so freely. You will become intentional, because not everyone deserves your time, your thoughts, your concern, or your presence. But society doesn't teach this. Society teaches you to be accessible, to be endlessly kind, to always be available. It praises the selfless, the ones who give everything until there's nothing left. But there's a danger in that. When you give without boundaries, you invite those who take without limits. And the people who don't care about you, they know this. They don't always act out of malice, but they recognize your willingness to overextend yourself. They feed on it. They get used to your kindness, your forgiveness, your emotional labor. And soon, it becomes expected. Not appreciated, just expected. You become a source, not a soul. A convenience, not a companion. That is the moment when your energy starts to feel like a burden instead of a gift, because it's no longer being honored, it's being used. And deep inside, you start to feel it. A quiet exhaustion, a sense of being invisible even when you're present. That's not love, that's emotional erosion. Think about it. How many times have you walked away from a conversation or a relationship feeling drained instead of fulfilled? That is the clearest sign that your energy has been spent without value. It's a transaction where you gave everything and received nothing of equal worth. But here's the truth. This isn't about selfishness. It's about clarity. About knowing that you have a limited amount of energy in a day, in a week, in a lifetime. Every moment you waste trying to be seen by people who refuse to open their eyes is a moment stolen from your own evolution. You are not here to prove your worth. You are here to live it. When you become conscious of your energy, you begin to see your life differently. You no longer chase. You no longer beg for closure or attention. You simply observe. And in that observation, you reclaim yourself. You stop showing up for people who only remember you when they need something. You stop explaining yourself to those who've already decided not to understand you. Merci. You stop bending your spirit for those who won't even lean in to listen. Instead, you begin to guard your space. You protect your peace. You give your energy to those who reflect it, who nourish it, who see it as sacred as you do. And something beautiful happens when you do that. Your life becomes lighter. You attract those who resonate with your presence rather than exploit it. You begin to feel whole, not because someone else fills you, but because you no longer allow anyone to empty you. So if there's one thing you remember today, let it be this. Your energy is not infinite, but your awareness of it can be. The moment you begin to treat it like gold, you stop wasting it on those who don't care. And in that moment, you don't lose anything. As anything you lose, anything you gain everything. Indifference is not confusion, it's clarity. We often misread silence as uncertainty. We tell ourselves stories to fill the quiet. Maybe they're just going through something. Maybe they don't know how to express themselves. Maybe if I just hold on a little longer, they'll come around. But indifference is not a lack of emotion. It's the presence of detachment. And detachment speaks louder than words ever could. When someone cares, you feel it. You don't have to decode their behavior, interpret their tone, or guess their intentions. Love doesn't hide in ambiguity. Affection doesn't require explanation. Genuine care is not confusing. It's consistent, clear, and steady. The moment you feel like you're standing in an emotional fog, trying to read signs that aren't there, that is your sign. That is your clarity. People show you how they feel about you, not through dramatic moments, but through quiet decisions. Through how they prioritize you when it's inconvenient. Through how they treat you when they have nothing to gain. Through how they respond, not just when you're at your best, but when you're vulnerable, unseen, or hurting. If someone is indifferent to your presence, to your pain, or to your joy, that is not a misunderstanding. That is a mirror, one that shows you your place in their life without sugarcoating it. Yet we resist that clarity. Why? Because the truth hurts. Because acknowledging someone doesn't care forces us to confront our own attachment, our own hope, our own illusions. So we cling to confusion. We convince ourselves that we need more time, more signs, more conversations to understand. But the reality is, deep down, we already know. We just don't want to accept what we know. But clarity, even when painful, is a gift. It liberates you from the chains of emotional fantasy. It returns you to yourself. It says you are no longer required to fight for someone's attention. You are free to walk away from people who see you as optional. Indifference is the soul's way of telling you, this path has ended. It may not come with closure or a loud goodbye. Often, it comes with silence, with distance, with cold replies, or forgotten birthdays. And still, we wait. We wait for the emotional grand finale that will never come. But the absence is the ending. The withdrawal is the answer. When you stop mistaking indifference for confusion, something powerful happens. You reclaim your emotional clarity. You stop overanalyzing texts, You stop checking who watched your story. You stop pretending that breadcrumbs are a banquet, and instead you begin to see clearly who makes space for you without being asked, who values your presence without condition, and who cares enough to make you feel safe, not unsure. Clarity isn't cruel. It's kind, because it saves you from wasting your heart on someone who's already made their decision in silence. It teaches you to respond to energy, not just words. It teaches you that love isn't supposed to make you anxious, confused, or constantly questioning your worth. It's supposed to feel like home, not a puzzle. When you embrace clarity over confusion, your world changes. You begin to prioritize what's real, not what's idealized. You learn to walk away not with bitterness, but with peace. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. So the next time someone's behavior makes you feel like you're not enough, remember, that is not a test of your value. It's a reflection of their choice. And in that choice, you find clarity. Don't run from it. Don't romanticize the ambiguity. Don't keep chasing after people who have already emotionally exited. Instead, honor what's true, even if it's not what you wanted, because clarity will give you what confusion never can. Freedom. And in that freedom, you finally stop trying to be seen by those who refuse to look. You start seeing yourself. You start loving from a place of strength, not desperation. You stop performing, proving, or persuading. You simply become yourself, unapologetically, in full clarity. Self-worth isn't proven by sacrifice. There is a quiet, damaging belief that many people carry without realizing. The idea that if you love more, give more, and suffer more for someone, you will eventually be seen, chosen, and valued. That somehow your pain will earn you a place in someone's heart. That your selflessness, your constant showing up, your tolerance of disrespect or neglect will convince them of your worth. But the truth is much simpler and far more liberating. Your worth doesn't increase when you shrink yourself for others. It doesn't rise when you tolerate more than you should. It doesn't become more visible through your pain. In fact, sacrificing yourself to be loved only teaches others that you are willing to be diminished. It sends a message: you can neglect me and I'll still be here. You can treat me poorly and I'll still try harder. And what you tolerate becomes the standard. Slowly, you start to believe that enduring mistreatment is love, that your suffering is noble, that your ability to stay in the wrong place is a sign of strength. But let's be honest, staying isn't always strong. Sometimes it's fear, fear of being alone, fear of not being wanted, fear that if you walk away, you'll never find something better, and that fear convinces you to keep sacrificing your time, your voice, your peace. You begin to perform your pain, hoping someone will finally notice and say you matter. But they won't, not in the way you need them to, because the kind of love that has to be earned through suffering is not love, it's emotional survival. And survival is not where you thrive, it's where you lose yourself. Real self-worth doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't scream, "Look at everything I'm doing for you." It exists quietly, confidently. It sets boundaries without guilt. It says, "I can love you and still leave if I am not being loved in return." It understands that giving too much in the wrong place isn't compassion, it's self-abandonment. When you constantly give in hopes of being validated, you enter a dangerous cycle. You begin to attach your identity to being needed, not being respected. You wear your sacrifices like a badge, as if they prove you're worthy. But sacrifice, when unreciprocated, becomes silent self-destruction. It chips away at your joy, your authenticity, your power. You start to live in reaction to someone else's absence instead of in alignment with your own presence. There's a difference between compromise and self-erasure, between caring deeply and losing yourself in someone else's emptiness. Love should never require you to betray your own soul. The right people won't ask you to shrink. They won't be blind to your efforts, nor will they need your suffering as proof of your devotion. You do not need to exhaust yourself to be chosen. You do not need to explain your value, prove your loyalty, or break yourself into pieces, hoping someone will take notice. You are not here to audition for love. You are love. And the moment you stop trying to prove that is the moment you begin to live from a place of truth. That truth will feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you spent years tying your worth to how much you give. You'll feel guilt for choosing yourself. You'll wonder if you're being selfish. But in time you'll realize something profound. Preserving your energy is not selfish, it's sacred. Respecting your limits is not cruel, it's wisdom. Walking away from people who only value what you do for them rather than who you are is not abandonment, it's alignment. There is power in loving deeply, but there is greater power in loving wisely, in knowing when to stay and when to step back, in giving not out of lack, but from a place of overflow. And that overflow only comes when you recognize that your worth is not something anyone else can give or take. It's already within you. So stop using sacrifice as your love language. Stop bleeding to make others comfortable. Stop believing that the more you suffer, the more you'll be loved, because true love doesn't demand your pain. It invites your presence. And anyone who can't see your worth, unless it's costing you your soul, was never seeing you to begin with. Your worth is not proven by how much you lose for someone, it's remembered when you choose not to lose yourself again. Attachment to the wrong people creates spiritual debt. There is a price we pay, not with money, not with time, but with something much deeper. When we stay connected to people who are not aligned with our soul, every interaction, every emotional entanglement with someone who drains you, disrespects you, or disturbs your peace, builds an invisible cost. And over time, that cost turns into what can only be described as spiritual debt, a heaviness you carry in your spirit even when the person is no longer around. We don't realize this at first. Attachment feels warm, it feels familiar. It gives the illusion of connection. But not all connections are sacred. Some are lessons. Some are mirrors, and some are anchors. And when you mistake an anchor for a lifeline, you drown trying to hold on. You see, attachment to the wrong people doesn't just slow you down, it distorts your sense of self. You start bending your values to keep them close. You silence your intuition to avoid conflict. You override the discomfort in your soul because your heart is too invested to let go. And that's where the debt begins. Because your soul always knows. It whispers. It aches. It signals when something or someone is not for you. And when you ignore those signals, you borrow against your peace. What makes it even more painful is that most of this debt is self-inflicted, not because we're weak, but because we confuse attachment with love. We believe that holding on is proof of commitment, that staying loyal, even when it hurts, means we are good people. But there's a difference between loyalty and self-betrayal. Loyalty, given to someone who has no intention of growing with you, becomes a prison. And you're the one who holds the key yet refuses to use it. This is how spiritual debt works. It doesn't come in a moment of pain. It accumulates. slowly, subtly. It shows up as emotional fatigue, as a lack of joy, as anxiety when you hear their name, as a growing distance between who you are and who you used to be. It erodes your confidence. It clouds your clarity. It makes you question your intuition, your boundaries, even your worth. And perhaps the hardest part is that the longer you stay attached to the wrong person, the harder it becomes to recognize yourself. You begin to adapt. You become skilled at emotional compromise. You learn how to justify what should never be acceptable. You start calling dysfunction normal and abandonment space. And before you know it, you're emotionally bankrupt. Giving, 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 with nothing left for yourself. But the truth is, you are not obligated to carry people who refuse to meet you with the same energy. You are not required to pay the emotional bills of someone who keeps withdrawing from your spirit without ever depositing anything meaningful in return. Love is not meant to leave you empty. Connection is not meant to cost you your sanity. And attachment is not meant to feel like a trap. You don't owe anyone your peace. You don't owe them your silence in the face of disrespect. You don't owe them endless forgiveness when there is no effort to change. The moment you recognize that someone is costing you your joy, your growth, your alignment, that is your cue. That is your moment to release the debt. Cutting ties with someone who no longer belongs in your life isn't cruelty. It's spiritual accountability. It's recognizing that your soul deserves rest, not repair, after every interaction. It's understanding that not everyone is meant to walk with you, and that some connections are simply there to teach you the value of disconnection. And when you finally release that weight, when you choose to step away from the person who has become a spiritual burden, you begin to rise. You begin to feel light again. You remember what it feels like to be whole, to be clear, to be you. You stop borrowing against your future peace just to survive your present situation. Because at the end of the day, no connection is worth the cost of your soul. No attachment is worth your awakening. Let go of what no longer honors you. Release the people who require you to go into death just to feel loved. Peace is not something you earn through suffering. It's something you claim when you realize you were never meant to carry what was never meant to carry what was never yours to begin with. Detachment is strength, not bitterness. So often, when you begin to step back, to stop responding, to stop pouring your heart into people who treat it carelessly, you're labeled as cold. You're accused of being distant, selfish, even unkind. But what most don't understand is that true detachment doesn't come from hatred. It comes from wisdom, from clarity, from finally understanding the weight of emotional misplacement. Detachment is not the absence of love. It is the presence of self-respect. There comes a point where you realize that not every relationship is meant to be saved. Not every connection is healthy to maintain. And not everyone you care about is capable of reciprocating that care. When this truth begins to settle in your spirit, the need to cling, to explain, to fix, it all begins to fade, not because you've stopped feeling, but because you've started seeing clearly. Detachment is the quiet decision to no longer hand your peace over to people who thrive in chaos. It's choosing to no longer fight for a seat at a table where your presence is barely acknowledged. It's no longer begging someone to understand your heart when they've already chosen to dismiss it. It is, in essence, the act of choosing yourself without apology. But that choice doesn't come easily. It often arrives through pain, through exhaustion, through too many nights of questioning what more you could have done. You reach a moment when you are no longer willing to abandon your own emotional safety just to maintain a connection. And that moment becomes a turning point. The world may try to convince you that detachment is cruel, that walking away is giving up, but it's not. Giving up is when you stop believing in your own value. Detachment is when you finally start honoring it. You stop arguing for your worth. You stop shrinking in someone else's shadow just to be accepted. You stop bleeding emotionally in hopes that someone else will finally notice the wound. There is nothing bitter about preserving your soul. There is nothing wrong with choosing stillness over stress or clarity over confusion. Detachment doesn't mean you no longer care. It means you are no longer controlled. It's a form of inner strength that says, I can love you, but I won't lose myself in the process. That kind of maturity takes time. It takes tears. And it takes incredible courage. In a world that glorifies chasing, fixing, and enduring, detachment is revolutionary. It is a refusal to engage in relationships that dishonor your spirit. It's stepping away from those who require you to stay small, stay silent, or stay broken just to be close. It's not about punishing anyone. It's about protecting your peace. There will always be people who don't understand your silence, who misinterpret your distance. Let them. Your path is not to be explained to those who never cared enough to walk it with you. Detachment doesn't demand understanding from others. It only requires truth from yourself. And when you begin to walk in that truth, something powerful happens. Your energy shifts. You stop chasing people. You stop chasing closure. You stop waiting for apologies that will never come. You simply move forward with grace, with dignity, and with a quiet strength that only those who've known deep emotional pain truly understand. Detachment is not bitterness. Bitterness is holding on to the pain. Detachment is letting it go. Bitterness keeps the wound open. Detachment allows it to heal. Bitterness replays the betrayal. Detachment rewrites the narrative, not from a place of blame, but from a place of growth. And the most beautiful thing? Detachment makes space. Space for new energy. Space for people who don't require you to prove your worth. Space for experiences that nourish rather than drain you. Space for you to rediscover your own voice, your own joy, your own wholeness. So don't let anyone guilt you into believing that walking away is weakness, that letting go means you never cared. Sometimes letting go is the highest act of love. Love for yourself, and even love for the other person, because you finally stop enabling their comfort at the cost of your peace. Detachment is not the end of feeling, it is the beginning of freedom. You are not here to convince anyone of your value. You are here to honor it. There's a deep misunderstanding that many of us carry from a very young age, that our worth is something that has to be proved, that in order to be loved, respected, or accepted, we must perform, we must achieve, we must please, we must impress. And slowly, without even realizing it, we begin to hand over our value to other people as if they hold the authority to decide it, but they don't. They never did. Your value is not up for debate. It's not determined by someone else's recognition, approval, or attention. It's not something you earn by being good enough for others. It's something you already possess by simply being. And when you forget that, you start running on an emotional treadmill, exhausting yourself to prove to people who don't see you that you're worthy of being seen. This is where so much of our inner suffering comes from. The belief that we must explain our worth, that we must defend it, argue for it, and keep proving it in the face of neglect, indifference, or rejection. But real value doesn't need validation. Just like a diamond doesn't stop being a diamond because someone is too blind to recognize it, your light doesn't stop shining just because someone else refuses to look. There's a subtle desperation that shows up when we forget this truth. We start overextending. We become too agreeable, too accommodating, too eager to please. We tolerate poor treatment. We accept less than we deserve, not because we don't feel pain, but because we're secretly hoping that one day our loyalty, our effort, our presence will be enough to change someone's mind. But you were never meant to beg for your place in someone's life. You were meant to belong without negotiation. When you make your value dependent on how others treat you, you give away your power. You become reactive, always adjusting yourself to match someone else's expectations. But people will always see you through the lens of their own limitations. Some are not capable of recognizing beauty unless it's packaged in a way they understand. Others can only love when it feels convenient or familiar, and some are too caught up in their own chaos to truly see anyone at all. So, what do? You stop trying to be chosen. You stop needing to be explained. You stop performing for people who have already decided not to appreciate what you bring, and instead, you begin to honor your value in the most powerful way possible, by living it, by setting boundaries, by choosing silence over unnecessary explanation, by walking away from situations that ask you to shrink, and by standing firm in who you are, even when the world tries to reshape you. You honor your value by no longer placing it in the hands of those who don't know how to hold it, by no longer chasing validation that leaves you empty. You don't need to become anything more to be worthy of love. You don't need to fit someone else's mold to deserve respect. You don't need to keep proving yourself to those who choose not to see your heart. This kind of self-honor is quiet. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't seek applause. It simply exists like a deep current beneath the surface, steady, powerful, and unshaken by outside noise. It shows up in the decisions you make, the boundaries you keep, the people you allow near your soul. It shows up in your silence, your grace, your refusal to let the world cheapen your spirit. And the more you live from this place, the more peace you'll find. You'll begin to attract people who don't need convincing, who see you without effort, who love you without condition. And, even more importantly, you begin to feel whole without needing to be understood. You are not here to chase acceptance. You are not here to win love as a prize. You are here to be, fully and unapologetically. To walk in your own truth, no matter who refuses to recognize it. To stay rooted in your worth, even when the world overlooks it. Let them misunderstand you. Let them walk away. Let them doubt. Because the people who truly see you, who are meant for you, will never need a presentation to appreciate your presence. Your value was never theirs to decide. It has always been yours to embody. The moment you stop wasting yourself on people who don't care, your life becomes a garden, not a battlefield. You begin to thrive in places of mutual energy, mutual love, mutual respect. You no longer beg. You no longer prove. You no longer dilute yourself for someone who never had the capacity to receive you. So walk away, not because you're cold, but because you finally become warm to yourself. The world changes the moment you do. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a strange comfort in the familiar. Even when that familiarity comes from pain, you convince yourself that maybe, just maybe this time it will be different. But deep Deep down you know it won't. Ladies and gentlemen, there's something tragically beautiful about realizing that someone simply Ladies and gentlemen, there's a strange comfort in the familiar. Even when that familiarity comes from pain, you convince yourself that maybe, just maybe this time it will be different. But deep down you know it won't. This is your wake-up call. Never, ever go back. Not to the place, the person, or the mindset that once made you question your worth. If you're watching this, it's not a coincidence. Something inside you is already pulling away from what no longer serves you. This is your reminder that healing is not about returning to what broke you to prove you've grown. It's about moving forward so far, you forget you ever had to prove anything at all. Watch till the end, because by the time this speech concludes, you'll understand something vital. Going back isn't brave. Leaving and never looking over your shoulder again. That's real strength. Now listen carefully. This could be the moment that finally sets you free. The illusion of the past is one of the most seductive traps of the human mind. It draws you in not with violence, but with softness, with moments that feel safe, with memories that feel warm, and with echoes that seem sweeter than they ever truly were. We tend to remember selectively. The pain fades, the joy glows brighter, and the confusion gets smoothed over by time. It becomes easy to look back and think, maybe it wasn't so bad, or maybe I gave up too soon, but this is where the deception begins. You're not seeing the past, you're seeing a version of it shaped by longing, by emptiness, or by the fear of facing what lies ahead. You can't trust nostalgia. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about comfort. It takes your memories and edits them like a filmmaker, cutting out the unbearable scenes and replaying the soft ones on a loop. It invites you back into spaces you once fought hard to escape, pretending as though they've changed. But they haven't. The place hasn't changed. The people haven't changed. Only you have. And what you forget in your longing is that returning means shrinking yourself back into the person who once accepted less than they deserved. The past cannot be relived. It cannot be fixed. It cannot be undone or redone. And yet, so many people try. They try to go back to an old relationship, to make it right this time. They try to return to a former lifestyle, to an old routine, to a previous version of themselves, thinking they'll feel safer or more in control there. But what they don't realize is this: the door they're trying to walk through no longer exists. That version of the world has closed, and trying to walk back through it is like trying to step into a shadow. Your growth means you see differently now, you feel differently now. That's why going back will never feel the same, even if everything looks familiar. It's because your awareness has evolved. You've tasted freedom, even if only briefly, and it's impossible to unknow that kind of truth. You cannot return to blindness once you've opened your eyes. Still, the mind will try to pull you backward. It will whisper doubts. It will romanticize the pain, disguise discomfort as home, and call dysfunction unfinished business. The past does not have anything new to say. If it had wisdom, it already gave it to you. If it had lessons, they've already been taught. Your only job is to carry them forward, not to revisit the place they came from. The illusion of the past is not just a memory. It's a mirror, and what it reflects back to you is not the truth, but your current state of mind. When you feel lost in the present, the past suddenly looks like clarity. When you're uncertain about your future, the past seems like stability. But it's neither. It's just a reflection of what you think you're missing. Real strength is recognizing the illusion for what it is, and choosing not to go back, not even mentally, not even emotionally. The past is not a refuge, it's a reference. You glance at it, learn from it, but you do not stay there. You do not live there, and you certainly do not return there. To escape the illusion, you must understand this. Every time you look back with longing, you are robbing the present of its power. You're placing your energy in a chapter that's already been written, instead of using it to create something new. You cannot build the future while clinging to the ruins of the past. The temptation to return will always come dressed in comfort. But remember, comfort is not the same as growth. And sometimes comfort is the bait that keeps you stuck in cycles you were never meant to repeat. When you feel that pull to go back, pause. Ask yourself, am I remembering the truth, or am I remembering what I want it to be? Am I revisiting something that grew me, or something that broke me? And most importantly, have I outgrown the version of myself that once belonged there? Because if you have, then you already know the answer. You already know. Never, ever go back. Growth is never comfortable, and it rarely makes sense while it's happening. That's why so many people are tempted to go back to old relationships, familiar environments, and outdated beliefs. But the truth is simple and unshakable. You cannot heal in the same place that broke you. You cannot evolve in the same patterns that kept you stuck. And you most certainly cannot thrive while shrinking yourself to fit inside the version of your life that no longer aligns with who you're becoming. Growth demands distance, not just from people or places, but from the former self that tolerated pain, confusion, and mediocrity. When you begin to change, when you start seeing your worth, your potential, and your truth, you'll find that some rooms feel too small. Some conversations feel exhausting. Some relationships feel like cages instead of companionship. That's not arrogance, it's awareness. That's not rejection, it's redirection. But this kind of clarity doesn't come easy. There's a mourning process that often goes unnoticed. When you grow, you grieve. You grieve the comfort of what once felt like home. You grieve the identity that was built around survival rather than peace. And that grief can make you second-guess yourself. It can convince you that maybe going back wouldn't be so bad, that maybe if you just gave it one more try, another visit, another call, another compromise, you could recover something worth saving. But what you're really doing is asking your future to apologize for your past. You cannot wear the clothes of a person who no longer exists. And going back, emotionally, mentally, or physically, forces you to do just that. It requires you to mute the voice inside that's been asking for more. It demands that you squeeze yourself into a mold that once felt familiar, but now feels suffocating. It may not be obvious at first. You may walk back into those old spaces and feel a strange sense of ease, of nostalgia. But give it time, that unease will creep in again. The same patterns will resurface. The same emotional weight will begin to settle on your shoulders, and you'll realize nothing changed except you. And that's the point. Growth doesn't just separate you from what's behind. It prepares you for what's ahead. It doesn't just protect you from repeating mistakes. It elevates your awareness so you can choose differently. So when you try to go back, you're actually betraying the very progress that you fought so hard to make. Distance isn't cruelty, it's clarity. It's the sacred space you give yourself so you can heal, reflect, and realign. It's the boundary that says, I am no longer available for anything that confuses, diminishes, or delays my evolution. And if that space makes others uncomfortable, let it. If it makes you doubt yourself for a moment, breathe through it. The discomfort of distance is far more sacred than the chaos of pretending. You must understand, the life you're meant to live cannot be built with the bricks of what nearly destroyed you. Healing requires new material, new thoughts, new actions, new standards. That's why returning is never truly about reconnecting with others. It's about reconnecting with the version of yourself that you've already outgrown. And that's the most dangerous part. Because when you shrink to fit back in, you forget how far you've come. You minimize your journey. You silence your progress. This is why going back is never the answer. Not when your soul is asking for more. Not when your spirit is restless with possibilities. Forward may be uncertain, yes, but uncertainty holds more life than the dead comfort of repetition. It holds expansion, creativity, and freedom. So when you're tempted to return, pause and ask, what am I really going back to? A place of safety or a pattern of self-betrayal? Am I seeking peace or simply avoiding the discomfort of transformation? Distance gives you the perspective you need to see the truth clearly. Growth makes that truth unavoidable. And once you've tasted it, you'll know going back isn't just unwise, it's impossible. Because the person you are becoming has no place in the world you left behind. Pain has a strange way of becoming familiar, almost like a friend you never meant to keep, but somehow couldn't let go of. It shows up not just to hurt, but to teach, to reveal, to awaken, and sometimes to completely dismantle the life you once thought you wanted. And yet, after pain has delivered its message, so many of us still try to go back to the relationship that wounded us, the habit that drained us, the mindset that limited us. We convince ourselves that maybe this time it will be different. Maybe we've changed enough to handle what once broke us. But that's the lie we tell ourselves when we fear facing what's next. What we forget is this. Pain is a signal, not a destination. It arrives with a purpose, but we were never meant to stay there. Once pain has done its job, once it has shown us where we were asleep, where we lacked boundaries, where we lost ourselves, there's no wisdom in returning to it, just to feel in control again. The lesson of pain is not meant to be recycled. It's meant to be understood and released. To return to it willingly is not strength. It's avoidance. It's seeking familiarity at the cost of your healing. Because sometimes the scariest thing in the world isn't pain. It's peace. Because peace is unknown. It's untested. And the unknown feels dangerous when pain is the only teacher you've ever trusted. But pain was never the destination. It was the detour that taught you to pay attention. It was the force that cracked your ego, shattered your illusions, and demanded that you listen to what your soul had been whispering all along. So why go back? Why revisit the battlefield once the war is over? Why return to the very things that made you question your worth, your identity, your sanity? The answer lies in your attachment to the person you were during the pain. That version of you, the one who tolerated, endured, and fought to survive, feels unfinished, and so you think revisiting the pain will bring closure. But closure doesn't come from going back. It comes from choosing not to, from recognizing that you already received what you needed from the experience. The scars are evidence of that. You don't need another wound to remember what it taught you. There is a temptation to revisit pain under the illusion of being stronger this time. But strength isn't proven by how well you endure what broke you. It's proven by how bravely you walk away from it, even when your heart still remembers its name. Real growth says, I don't need to test myself again. I already know the outcome. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's evolution. And yet you'll feel the pull. You'll feel the urge to reach out, to explain, to revisit, to check if maybe things have changed. But nothing changes if the foundation is the same, if the energy is the same, if the people are the same. You're not going back to a new chapter. You're going back to reread one you already closed. The ink is dry, the pages are worn. The story has already been told. Your healing does not require you to return. It requires you to move forward, to honor the lesson without reopening the wound, to trust that the pain was a messenger, not a home. Let it go. Let it fade into memory. Let it become something you reference, not something you relive. There is no glory in suffering for the sake of proving your resilience. You've already proven that you can survive. Now it's time to show yourself that you can thrive, that you can build joy where there was once sorrow, that you can choose peace, not because it's easy, but because it's finally time. So when the pain calls you back, don't answer. When the past lures you in with its familiar ache, don't revisit. When you feel the urge to test your strength against old wounds, remind yourself that true power lies in not needing to. Pain served its purpose. It woke you up. Now stay awake. And whatever you do, never, ever go back. Life does not wait. It moves, silently, constantly, without your permission. Whether you participate or not, the tide continues, the clock ticks, the world turns. And in this endless unfolding, one truth becomes clear. Forward is where life happens, not behind you. Not in yesterday, not in memories or regrets, but in the raw, untamed, unpredictable space of what comes next. And yet, so many people live backward. They anchor their emotions in what used to be. They tie their self-worth to old experiences, past relationships, former identities, and by doing so they miss the very moment they are living in. They miss life. Moving forward is not always easy, but it is always necessary, because forward is where growth takes root. It's where new beginnings are born, where healing turns into purpose, and where clarity becomes action. You cannot evolve by dragging yesterday into today. You cannot become who you were meant to be, while still clinging to who you used to be. The fear of moving forward often comes from the false belief that what's ahead cannot match what's behind, that the love you lost, the opportunity you missed, the time that slipped away can never be replaced. But life doesn't deal in replacements. It deals in revelations. What's behind you was never meant to be the peak. It was only the preparation. And what's ahead is not a repetition, it's an invitation. To move forward, you must allow the past to lose its power over you. That doesn't mean you forget. It means you no longer let it define your direction. You stop trying to recreate moments that have already served their purpose. You stop reaching into old stories trying to pull out new meanings. Forward is not about ignoring the past. It's about refusing to live in it. So many people get stuck, not because they lack strength, but because they lack trust. They don't trust the process of becoming. They don't trust the unknown, so they stay in what's familiar. They revisit old relationships, return to the same environments, replay the same habits, and with each return they rob themselves of something sacred, their own becoming. Forward holds surprise, It holds beauty you haven't met yet, people you haven't encountered, lessons you haven't discovered, but you'll never experience them if your heart is locked in yesterday. You'll never see what's possible if you keep staring at what's gone. What you need to understand is this: the future is not waiting to happen to you. It's waiting to be created by you. You are not bound by the script of your past. You are the author of what comes next. And if that scares you, good, because fear is often the first sign that something real is about to happen. Fear is not the enemy, stagnation is. You can live a life that looks like safety but feels like suffocation, or you can step into the unknown and breathe freely for the first time. The most dangerous thing you can do is pause your life out of fear of what's ahead. Life doesn't pause with you. Opportunities won't wait. Healing won't wait. Purpose won't wait. Everything you desire, peace, fulfillment, connection, it all exists forward. It's never behind you. So choose to move, even if it's slow, even if it's unclear, even if your steps are small and unsure, because forward, no matter how fragile it feels, will always be more powerful than staying still. Momentum, no matter how slight, will always carry you closer to the truth of who you are. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to know the outcome. You only need to be willing to let go, willing to grow, willing to believe that what's coming is worth more than what you're leaving behind. So take the step. Leave the familiar. Release the memory. Drop the weight. Turn your eyes away from the past and place them firmly on what's ahead. Because this is where life begins, right here, right now, not in the chapters already read, but in the ones you're about to write. And whatever happens, never, ever go back. Familiarity is a powerful illusion. It wraps itself around you like a blanket, convincing you that because something is known, it must be safe. It whispers that because you've walked this path before, it must still be the right one. But familiarity isn't freedom. And just because something feels comfortable doesn't mean it's meant for you anymore. There's a quiet danger in returning to what's familiar, especially when what's familiar once caused you pain. The human mind is drawn to patterns, even when those patterns are destructive. We choose the predictable over the uncertain, even when predictability keeps us in cycles of frustration, sadness, or emotional numbness. The relationship you keep going back to, the toxic friendship you can't seem to end, the version of yourself you refuse to outgrow, these are not signs of loyalty. They're signs of fear. Fear of change, fear of discomfort, fear of who you'll become when you finally let go. But freedom lives beyond that fear. It lives in the unfamiliar, in the decision to leave behind what no longer serves you, even when it's all you've ever known. That's where your true self begins to surface. That's where your life starts to expand beyond the walls you built around your heart. When you keep going back to what's familiar, you sacrifice possibility, you trade growth for certainty, and in doing so, you reinforce the lie that comfort is the same as peace. But they are not the same. Comfort can be heavy. Comfort can be suffocating. Peace, on the other hand, is light. It's spacious. It doesn't demand that you shrink or stay quiet. It doesn't ask you to settle or endure. Peace invites you to rise, to breathe deeply, and to finally stop pretending. The familiarity you keep returning to is not a sanctuary. It's a cage with velvet walls. It looks soft, it feels safe, but it keeps you trapped. It keeps you from stepping into the unknown, from discovering what you're really capable of, from becoming who you were always meant to be. You were not created to survive in loops. You were meant to grow in spirals, expanding, shedding, transforming. And yet, every time you choose familiarity over freedom, you betray your evolution. You silence that part of you that is calling for more. That whisper inside that says, "This isn't it. There's something greater." You hear it. You feel it. But the moment it rises, fear drags you back to what you know, to what you've already survived. But survival isn't the goal anymore. You've already proven you can endure. Now the question is, can you allow yourself to live? Living requires risk. It requires trust. Trust that the unknown will not break you, but build you. Trust that letting go won't destroy you, but release you. Trust that you are capable of creating a life beyond your current limits, even if you have no evidence of it yet. Ask yourself, why do you keep returning? What are you hoping to find that wasn't there the last time? What part of you is still seeking validation, still hoping for a different outcome, still believing that if you just love harder, work more, wait longer, things will change? But if they haven't changed by now, it's not because you didn't try hard enough. It's because what's familiar is simply no longer aligned with your future. Familiarity breeds comfort, but growth breeds fulfillment. And you must choose. Do you want to feel safe, or do you want to feel free? There will be moments when the past pulls at you, when the ache of what once was feels like it might be worth revisiting. But remember, you're not that person anymore. You've changed. And going back would mean abandoning that change, dimming your light, folding yourself into a shape that no longer fits. You owe it to yourself to keep walking forward, even when the path is unclear. You owe it to your healing, to your future, to the version of you who's still becoming. Familiarity may be tempting, but your freedom is not behind you. It's ahead. So keep going and never, ever go back. Change is not always loud. It doesn't always announce itself with fireworks or grand epiphanies. Sometimes it shows up quietly, in the way you start questioning the conversations you used to entertain, in the way certain places no longer feel like home, in the discomfort that rises when you try to return to old patterns. That's the thing about transformation. It doesn't ask for permission. It begins the moment something within you says, "I can't live like this anymore." And once that shift begins, there's no turning back, not truly. Because each time you attempt to go back, whether to a relationship, a way of thinking, or a version of yourself that once felt safe, you're met with resistance, not from the world around you, but from your own soul. It's as if your spirit is saying, "We've outgrown this. Why are we still here?" That inner conflict, the tension between who you were and who you are becoming, is the sign that returning is no longer an option. Because returning is, in essence, resisting the change that has already taken place. Change demands surrender. It asks you to loosen your grip on everything you thought you were, everything you thought you needed, and everything you believed defined your worth. And that's terrifying, because it means stepping into a version of yourself that you don't fully know yet. A version that hasn't been tested, hasn't been accepted, hasn't been validated by the familiar world you used to belong to. But that's the path. That's the journey. You don't meet your highest self by staying where you've always been. Resisting change is natural. We all do it, often without realizing. We cling to what we know, not because it's good for us, but because it's predictable. Chaos can become a routine. Pain can feel like home. Dysfunction can feel like love when it's all you've known. So when change enters, it disrupts that false sense of order. It threatens the identities we've built around suffering, endurance, and survival. But here's the truth. Survival is not your life's purpose. Thriving is living deeply, freely, and fully. That's why you're here. Every time you go back, you delay the life that's trying to meet you. You delay your peace, your clarity, your alignment. You can't be both who you were and who you're becoming. One must be left behind. And the longer you try to drag your past self into your future, the heavier your journey becomes. There's a kind of sacred discomfort that comes with stepping into a new reality. It doesn't always feel empowering at first. Often it feels like loss. Loss of people, habits, and roles that once defined you. You also now look back, rummagingly frightened at what has happened, and roles that once defined you. But in that loss is freedom. The freedom to choose again. The freedom to build a life that reflects who you are, not who you were forced to become to survive. Going back often feels easier because change requires responsibility. It asks you to stop blaming your past and start creating your present. It asks you to stop waiting for permission and start giving yourself the love, respect, and boundaries you once begged others for. That's not just growth, that's liberation. You are not obligated to revisit what you've outgrown. You don't have to explain your transformation to those committed to misunderstanding it. You don't have to keep showing up in roles that no longer fit just to make others comfortable. You're allowed to walk away, to evolve unapologetically, to protect your peace, even if it means disappointing the past. There's nothing noble in staying stuck. There's nothing wise in resisting what life is trying to teach you. The moment you feel the pull to go back, remind yourself you've already been there. You already know how that story ends. The growth, the expansion, the fulfillment you seek, it's not behind you. It's not in the familiar. It's in the risk of becoming. So trust the discomfort. Trust the pull toward something new, even when you can't name it yet. Trust that change isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. Because once change has begun, the only direction that honors it is forward. And for the sake of everything you're becoming, never, ever go back. You've come too far to turn around now. Too much has been broken, healed, rebuilt, and redefined for you to even consider returning to what once kept you small. Every painful moment, every lesson, every silent transformation, it all led you here, to this clarity, to this truth. And the truth is simple. The past has nothing new to offer you. You're not who you used to be. You've seen too much, felt too deeply, and grown too wide in spirit to fit back into the places and relationships that once confined you. What once felt like home now feels like a limitation. What once gave you comfort now feels like a weight. And that is not a loss. It's a sign, a sacred signal that your soul is ready for more. You don't need to revisit what wounded you to prove you've healed. Your peace is proof. Your detachment is proof. Your ability to walk away without explanation is proof. Moving forward isn't about denying the past. It's about honoring yourself enough to stop living in it. So let the old versions of you rest. Let the memories fade into meaning. Let the pain become wisdom, not a reason to return. This is your time to trust the unknown, to lean into the unfamiliar, to choose yourself completely, even if no one understands. Because what's ahead is not just survival. It's alignment. It's peace. It's purpose. And for everything you've endured and everything you still dream of becoming, remember this. Never, ever go back. Ladies and gentlemen, what if I told you that the world's definition of success, money, fame, power is nothing more than a mirage? We chase it endlessly, only to arrive thirsty, still searching. The truth is, the greatest empire you'll ever rule is not outside of you, it is within. Imagine standing in a world full of noise, yet your mind remains unshaken. Imagine facing storms of doubt, betrayal, and failure, yet nothing inside you breaks. That is real success, mastery of self. And here's the truth most people miss. If you don't conquer yourself, no amount of wealth or recognition will ever feel enough.